everybody. Thank you for joining us once again at Tech Safe through the courtesy of our wonderful cable station at WCCA-TV in Worcester, Massachusetts. Give a shout out to Adam Rice, who's our wonderful producer. Thank you, Adam. And today for episode 47, I'm delighted to have back the guest that we had in episode 45. Shelley Wright from Canadian Educators for Safe Technology has been a school teacher for 29 years before she retired. And she has had a lot of experience up in Canada, not only with teaching and growing our bright minds, but also with the wireless radiation issue. So Shelley, welcome, and thank you again for giving us your time today.
Thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. It's wonderful to be here.
Okay, so we welcome everybody to go back and watch episode 45, which was Shelley's part one. But Shelley, for those who may not have seen it yet, can you just give us a quick recap of how you discovered that wireless radiation is something that can do us some harm?
Well, before wireless was installed in my school, I felt completely healthy. I enjoyed a variety of outdoor activities and adventures with my family and friends. And in the last quarter of my 29-year elementary teaching career, I experienced adverse biological symptoms that were induced by radio frequency microwave radiation. And I endured microwave radiation levels that were 10 times more than I could tolerate. Oh. So, determined not to quit my dream job, I took deep breaths through the pain and I documented all of the triggers and symptoms that I experienced from wireless exposures in the classroom, which induced immediate or latent effects, and my symptoms would disappear in the absence of wireless devices and reappear around devices, even when I wasn't immediately aware of their presence. At school, I felt intense head pains when colleagues tested. Around cellular calls, I'd feel pins and needles and building frontal head pressure. I took extra precautions, which surpassed Health Canada's Safety Code 6, encouraging students to use airplane mode after downloading data, but I still felt sick. So around wireless access points in my classroom, I'd experience electrical-like shocks in the pineal gland region in my brain, and then always building head pressure. I felt sharp breast pains around wireless laptops and tablets, and around Fitbits, I'd always experience diabetic-like symptoms and need to eat to balance this sugar flux. Sharp head pains always led to increased agitation, and I naturally avoided rooms where my symptoms were intense and discovered from an RF meter that these rooms actually had higher levels of microwave frequency radiation. The storage room in my school was one of the safest places where I could recover and have small meetings. I became really interested in this topic and learned from the American Academy of Pediatrics that RF exposures are recognized and that they can induce permanent injury. For example, leukemia, brain tumors, infertility, heart failures, and RF is known as the cofactor for autism and neurodegenerative diseases like ALS, multiple sclerosis, and Parkinson's. So to manage my symptoms at school, I had excellent attendance before wireless was installed throughout my school. And I jumped through exhausting political hoops to receive minimal accommodations like permission to wire my teacher notebook. I plugged in a little white box that looks like this. It's a power line carrier into a duplex receptacle in my classroom. I plugged in an Ethernet cable into the box and then plugged the other end to wire my teacher notebook. But without accommodations like an on-off switch or EMF shielding on my classroom access point, I was exposed to wireless signals in my classroom even when the signals were not required. I experienced MS-like symptoms and daily migraines from Tuesday through Saturday. Sundays were my recovery days. So what this meant was I was not able to freely circulate and connect with my students. To avoid tripping, I remained seated at my reading table, teaching full-time with energy and focus would have been possible with free accommodation. An on-off switch connected to the classroom access point, safe tech signage, and student and staff safe tech training.
Oh, Shelley, thank you so much for sharing that. And I suspect you are not alone. You're not the only teacher out there who's experiencing this. And in fact, I was brought in to do a screening of the award-winning documentary Generation Zapped at a school here in Massachusetts because the art teacher was having symptoms like you described, and there was a wireless access point in the ceiling in her classroom. And she was so fortunate to have a principal who really listened and understood what she was saying. And in her curriculum, she didn't even use computers, so why have that radiating access point up there? So they mitigated her classroom, which was great. And then they brought me in and we did a screening of Generation Zapped, which was amazing. It's still widely available through most of our library streaming services with Canopy and Hoopla. You can just watch this, bring your friends in, bring your family in, and watch it together and start the discussion. And it was actually that very screening of Generation Zapped that led to the state of New Hampshire becoming the first in the United States to pass a law to investigate this. There was a woman who came to that screening, and she had figured out that all of her symptoms were coming from the wireless in her own home. And so she mitigated everything and got well. And her kids didn't believe her husband didn't believe her, but they had given her a plant that she had in her kitchen, and it did a whole lot of nothing for a long time. And as soon as she transitioned to the hardwired or cabled connections that Shelley mentioned and turned off all the antennas around the house, that plant shot up like 15 inches in just a couple of months. So this same woman, Deb Hodgson, went and spoke to her state legislators, and long story short, they passed the first law in the country to investigate and came up with this groundbreaking commission report that documents all the conflicts of interest with our federal agencies and the wireless industry. And that's why we don't know about this issue, is because it's kept out of the public eye. But they also make 15 recommendations for what to do, and Shelley nailed them. In our schools, we should be transitioning to hardwired cabled connections, and as she showed, it's not rocket science to fix. Every one of those access points has a couple of Ethernet ports in it. All you would have to do is drop an Ethernet cable down from that access point, turn off the antennas in the access point, and you still get the connection. And then at desk level, you can just put a switch or like an extension box for electronics, and you could plug in the teacher's device like you did with your tablet. You could plug in all of the student devices for what's really appropriate for children at that age. You know, we need to come back to what's an appropriate amount of time. And there's this great book called The Anxious Generation that many people have read in the last year. Dr. Jonathan Haidt from New York University, he's a social psychologist. In a nutshell, he says, when we gave our kids smartphones back in 2012, we robbed them of their childhood. So Shelley also spoke about the need to do training, and there's already K through 12 training available today on prevention from injuries from microwave radio frequency radiation. And I have a little nonprofit called Safer Screen Time, where we've got a little course online. You can complete it in about an hour, and it will teach you the science. It will teach you the, all the symptoms, as Shelley pointed out, and everybody's body is different. So what one person experiences could be different to the next person. But our cells communicate electronically all the time. These cells whisper back and forth through all this voltage, and this man-made radiation is just overpowering us. And kids are especially vulnerable. So just know, if you're just joining this conversation, there are so many great resources already out there. Dr. Victoria Dunkley is a psychiatrist, and she has a 4-week protocol to reset your child's brain. end meltdowns, raise grades, and boost social skills by reversing the effects of electronic screen time. So it's two-pronged. It's the excess screen time that we've fallen into the trap of, and then on top of that, it's the microwave radiation. So, Shelley, thank you for sharing how you got into this. And you've talked to us a little bit about the kinds of devices and infrastructure exposures in the schools. And having been a teacher for all those years when we didn't have technology in the classroom, what kinds of things have you noticed? So what tipped me off to ask you this question is I had done a Generation Zap screening at a library one time. And afterwards, a seasoned school teacher came up to me and she said, "It just breaks my heart." I think she was a kindergarten teacher, and she said, "Today, when those children are lining up at the end of the day, waiting for their bus, she sees the little boys especially sitting there in line going like this because they're getting geared up to get their addiction fixed when they get home and get on their gaming devices." So I know it's happening, but from an educator standpoint, what have you noticed that was different when we started bringing this in?
Yes, since the installation of wireless access points, the introduction of Bring Your Own Device, BOYD policies, and the multitude of wireless devices in classrooms, teachers across Canada have reported a noticeable decline in student behavior and mental health aspects of that. These products affect the way children behave, the way they learn, and teachers have reported an increase in digital distraction, ADHD behaviors, mental health issues, like increased chronic anxiety, coupled with inadequate coping mechanisms. And this leads to physical or mental health outbursts and the inability to manage stress. Cyberbullying from outside school hours is often addressed in the school as a necessity to maintain focus and optimal learning during school hours. So this is super time consuming for teachers and admin to deal with these added distractions and mental health issues. The distractions from smartphones and other devices have disrupted the focus in classrooms and leading to attention spans that are not very long, or engagement in class lessons. So social media, gaming, and messaging apps compete for students' attention, and this undermines their ability to concentrate and focus in the classroom. Moreover, as you mentioned, the excessive screen time, it's been linked to this anxiety, impulsivity, and difficulty regulating emotions, which can manifest in more disruptive behaviors in the classroom. And instances of cyberbullying, inappropriate online activity, and overexposure to digital content further complicates this learning environment, straining peer relationships and student-teacher interaction. So this addictive and cyberbullying behavior has become a significant burden for school boards. And because of that, 4 Ontario school boards have sued TikTok, Meta, and Snapchat $4.5 billion, claiming that they're disrupting students' learning. And these financial resources can compensate for students who are affected by these intentionally addictive media platforms and help to develop safer products for students. This funding could facilitate the provision of direct support from social workers, psychologists, and attentional resources as required in schools. So to address these challenges, school boards really need clear policies that promote responsible device use and limit distractions alongside programs that educate students on digital wellness, like the program that you were speaking about. Prioritizing these strategies, schools can foster healthier and more focused learning environments that support positive behaviors and academic success.
Wow.
In addition to mental health issues, according to the world-renowned epidemiologist Deborah Davis, RF EMR can impact our hormones, which can increase anxiety, spike glucose in our brain level, which may affect ADHD behaviors. That's how it's manifested. So students and staff with medical conditions experience Now, disproportionate absenteeism because of the RF-induced adverse symptoms they experience. And in the absence of wireless radiation, they can work full-time in school. So this is what we are concerned about as the Director of Canadian Educators for Safe Technology. We're concerned about the acute and chronic effects of this wireless radiation exposure in school. And we know that there are many negative biological impacts on physical as well as mental health of all students and staff, especially vulnerable students. We're concerned about pregnant or medically vulnerable staff as well.
Wow, Shelley, I am just in awe of everything that you're doing up there in Canada, and thank you so much. That lawsuit that you mentioned, when we look at the parallels between big Wi-Fi, big tech, and big tobacco, we see so many parallels. And when big tobacco was finally outed as being the carcinogen that it is, and it causes all sorts of other things from secondhand smoke to asthma, and we can't keep polluting our bodies and expect to perform the way that we always had. But I have heard that there are billions set aside by industry already, because when they run the numbers, it's still more profitable for them to push these products and pay later. So it's, for them, it's business as usual. For our children and our teachers, it can be the end of what was once a safe, healthy learning environment. But as you note, the good news is we know how to fix this. It just comes down to getting education out to the parents, to the public. And then once we have a good core group of parents, who've had some time to look at this, because we've all been conditioned when we open our mouth and go, guys, there's something wrong with wireless. Industry has already conditioned us to go tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists, man, we don't need to listen, let's just keep doing what we're doing, and then we pick up our device and go back down to it, right? So we need to get parents informed, and I am so honored that Shelley has joined me for a 10-town pilot program that we're executing on right now to start coming out of our own personal comfort zones. We kept expecting higher authorities to fix this for us, and they're just not. They are bound in these systems that keep some of them tied. I learned that it's a rare public servant who's also a public leader and will, really dive into this. Representative Patrick Abrami up in New Hampshire was the only one who has really done this. So as much as we want somebody up above to just come in and fix this for us, it's not going to happen. My town became the first in the nation to even have a little sign posted in our schools with best practices for mobile devices. Turn these things off when we're not using them, right? Turn the Wi-Fi off. And all that means is put a wall switch on with a timer. So the Wi-Fi is off all the time, and then if you need to upload, download data, turn it on for 5 minutes and then turn it back off. And that would have allowed Shelley to stay safely in her classroom, and it wouldn't have been jacking those kids with microwaves all day long. So we also became the first in the nation, and this is something everybody can do in their own community, is to put a radio frequency radiation detection meter on loan. And I know Shelley's got one at the ready. I think she's about to pull hers out too. But because it is invisible, it makes it so easy for people to just blow it off, right? And not take it seriously until they start getting sick and go, wait, what was somebody telling me about this? And this actually happened to a colleague down in Virginia during the pandemic. Both her children were issued one of those tablets. And when Doris started seeing these headaches and stomach aches and nausea and dizziness and anxiety, she's like, what is going on? My kids are healthy as horses. And it was when those tablets came home. And she got her utility, her wireless internet provider, to come in and just run the hardwired cabling to her kids' computers, and all their symptoms went away. So we know how to fix this, but there's no cavalry coming. So that's why we like to share local resources. Sit down with your loved ones and watch Generation Zapped, and then have a conversation. And every month I do a free public education webinar This month it's going to be the 30th, which is next Thursday, or it might be shortly after this video is released, but 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. And I will hold your hand, I'll help you connect the dots on everything, and then we do a really nice Q&A at the end where you can ask your questions and we'll do our best to answer them or to point you to resources where you can get that information. So I'm delighted that Shelley is part of this champion program that we're doing, and she's already begun to build out her network up there. She's already started handing information to people in her community. So what are you doing, Shelley, and what can we support you on up there? What are baby steps that all of us could start doing to lessen our exposure and just see if it starts making a difference? And I like to add in this caveat. Some people say, I don't feel anything, I'm fine. But it's cumulative in our tissues and in our body. So tomorrow could be the day you hit that tipping point. So if they start experiencing these symptoms, what baby steps would you recommend that people start with?
Thank you so much, Cece, for doing the Champions in Schools program. It is just truly an inspirational program for all of us to start at the grassroots level. So it's just amazing. And I hope many people will come on board and start working with their communities, because I believe it's the grassroots level that can make the biggest difference. We have worked with Auditor General petitions. We have worked with governments at all sorts of levels. But I think truly this is where the real work begins. So in terms of baby steps to start reducing exposures, assessment of RF emissions is the first key step to mitigation. You can locate and measure sources of radiation so you can reduce and contain the microwave signal in your home, and school boards can do it in the school. So school boards can use trained IT staff or hire a building biologist trained to measure and reduce RF levels. As Cece mentioned, our wonderful Pro 2 meter can be used at home, and some community members have this in their libraries, or people can encourage libraries to purchase one of these so that in the community, parents can begin to measure and mitigate exposures at home. Measuring ambient levels without devices can can identify the RF reduced classrooms or access points that are operating in their schools. So measuring these ambient levels without devices can also determine if there's outside sources like cell towers or cellular antennas. The maximum peak RF signals are the most biologically active and can be measured while all devices are operating to assess what the typical real-world exposure levels are in a classroom. And this is important. The maximum peak RF signals are important to measure that. And with real-time exposure levels in the entire classroom. All schools can minimize wireless overlap and costly unused signals to prevent prolonged harmful exposures. So schools can easily reduce the wireless energy consumption following building biologist recommendations, which is the ALORA principle. It's a precautionary principle that stands for as low as reasonably achievable. Schools can reduce the power density of signals while maximizing device efficiency. ALORA reduces the wireless overlap and harmful exposures. So in Ontario, Hartsbrook and Lynbrook schools reduce their power density by 25% without noticeable impact on device performance. So this is pretty significant. My favorite, ideally, are on-off switches connected to a PoE, which stands for Power Line over Ethernet Access Point. This allows staff to turn on Wi-Fi only when necessary and turn off the access point when it's not in use. And portable access points on a cart can boost signals if additional signals are needed for tablets. So the beauty of an on-off switch is that it can be actually something that can be moved from classroom to classroom. It doesn't have to be a permanent structure. It's very easy to move. And safe text signage is inexpensive and a key educational tool. One sign in each classroom with detailed instructions can remind students and staff to practice safe tech at all times. There are basic safe tech tips that will minimize these health risks, and students can learn that devices should be placed on a solid surface, not on their lap. To protect sensitive eye tissue, devices should be at least 30 centimeters away from their face, and cell phones should be used at arm's length and always use speaker mode or wired earbuds. They shouldn't use wireless earpieces or other wireless accessories.
Oh, Shelley, that is such valuable information, and I hope that in the future you will join me again and we will do another episode on how to open this conversation with the schools. And as we get further along in our pilot program, we're working with people all across the US and you up in Canada, and we'll have some good lessons learned to share with others because our schools have invested a lot of money into this technology. You know, Ed Tech came in and they said, this is what your kids are going to need to succeed in our world. So nobody knew better. That's how it was in my school when I first fell down the rabbit hole on this issue. So we feel for our school boards when they first fall into this information because it goes counter to everything that they've been told. So why don't you tell us where folks can get in touch with you? And then we'll end this episode and we'll have you come back in the future and we'll talk more about how to open this conversation with our schools.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Cece. So I have a local website and some Facebook groups. My website is Safe Technology in School Communities. It's you can check that out by putting in your browser safetechschools.ca. And I also have a Facebook page, and it is available now for the local media. I also have, and that can be checked out from that website. So you can go into the website, safetechschools.ca, and the Facebook page will be the link. Have a Facebook page for Canadian Educators for Safe Technology. Now, this Facebook page is just being established, and it will add more items to that. And to reach that national nonprofit organization, it's www.facebook.com, Canadian Educators for Safe Technology.
Oh, fantastic, Shelley. And there's also Canadians for Safe Technology, which Shelley is part of. And that was co-founded by Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. And I know Shelley works with a lot of heavy hitters up there in Canada. She's working with the scientists, she's working with the doctors, she's working with captains of industry. So that will continue, but for today, we really could do so much good by just getting parents involved and protecting those kids ourselves today until public policy catches up. So Shelley, thank you again for joining us. It's always my honor and pleasure to have you. And everybody, have a tech safe day, and we'll see you next time.